Welcome to Picture Mavericks, where every frame has a story. Today we are looking at a film that had no obvious reason to exist and found one anyway. The Longest Yard was released in 2005, directed by Peter Siegel, and it is a remake of Robert Aldrich's 1974 film of the same name. The original is considered a classic of its era. Remaking a beloved film with Adam Sandler in the lead role was a decision that generated considerable skepticism before a single frame had been shot. The film grossed over $190 million worldwide. It became one of the most watched sports comedies of the decade. And it accomplished something that remakes rarely manage, which is to justify its own existence by being genuinely good at what it is attempting rather than simply trading on the reputation of what it replaced. Understanding how it did that is worth examining carefully. The premise is built on a structure that sports films have used reliably for decades. A fallen figure is placed in a situation where redemption is only possible through an act of collective effort that requires him to put someone else's interests ahead of his own. The game at the end is never really about the game. It is about whether the protagonist has become the person the audience has been watching him become across the preceding two acts. The Longest Yard executes that structure cleanly and without apology. Paul Crewe, played by Sandler, is a former professional quarterback who threw a game for money, destroyed his career, and has spent the years since living off the wealth of his girlfriend without direction or purpose. He is introduced at his lowest point, and the film does not ask the audience to like him immediately. It asks the audience to watch him and reserve judgment. That is the correct approach for this kind of character, and the script maintains it with consistency. Crewe earns the audience's investment gradually rather than being granted it up front, and the incremental nature of that process is what gives the final act its emotional weight. The prison setting is where the film's cultural context becomes relevant. The dynamic between the inmates and the guards is the engine that drives everything outside the game itself, and the film uses that dynamic to establish stakes that go beyond individual redemption. Warden Hazen, played by James Cromwell, is the institutional authority the film positions as its primary obstacle. He is not a cartoonish villain. He is a man who understands how power operates within a closed system and uses that understanding with precision. His interest in the football game between the inmates and the guards is not sporting. It is political. A dominant performance by the guards reinforces the hierarchy he depends on. Any other outcome threatens it. That framing elevates the game from a sports spectacle into something with genuine stakes for everyone involved. The inmates are not playing for a trophy. They are playing for a moment of dignity inside a system that is designed to deny them that. The film does not make this argument loudly or repeatedly. It builds it into the structure of every scene that precedes the game and allows the audience to carry it into the final act without being instructed to do so. The ensemble that forms around Crewe is where the film generates most of its comedy and much of its warmth. Chris Rock as caretaker brings an energy to the film that operates at a different register than Sandler's more restrained lead performance, and the contrast between the two works in the film's favor rather than creating tonal inconsistency. Caretaker is the person who understands the politics of the prison environment instinctively and navigates them with a combination of humor and pragmatism that the film uses as its primary comic engine. The supporting cast of inmates recruited for the team is handled with more care than ensemble sports comedies usually apply to this kind of material. Each character is given enough definition to be distinguishable and enough screen time to make their investment in the game feel personal rather than generic. The film does not ask the audience to care about the team as an abstraction. It builds the team in front of the audience and lets the caring develop from familiarity. Burt Reynolds appears in a supporting role as Nate Scarborough, a former professional coach now serving time, and his presence in the film does specific work that goes beyond nostalgic casting. Reynolds played the lead role in the 1974 original, and his appearance here functions as a form of continuity between the two films that the remake earns rather than simply assumes. His mentorship of Crewe carries weight precisely because the audience understands what Reynolds represents in the context of this particular story. Peter Siegel's direction is functional and well-calibrated to the material. The football sequences are shot with enough clarity to be followed easily and enough physicality to feel consequential. The comedy sequences are given room to breathe without being allowed to interrupt the film's momentum for longer than they need to. The tonal balance Siegel maintains across the film's running time is its most consistent craft achievement. The Longest Yard is simultaneously a broad comedy, a redemption narrative, and a film with something genuine to say about dignity and institutional power. Holding those three registers together across nearly 2 hours without allowing any one of them to collapse the others is a more demanding task than it looks, and the film accomplishes it reliably. The final game is where everything the film has constructed is tested, and the result is a sequence that earns its emotional payoff through the work that preceded it rather than through manipulation or escalation for its own sake. Crew's central decision during the game, whether to throw it as Warden Hazen has pressured him to do or to play to win, is the moment the film has been building toward since its opening scene. The resolution of that decision is satisfying not because it is surprising, but because it is inevitable in the right way. The audience has watched Crew move from a man who threw a game because it was easier than integrity to a man for whom that choice is no longer available. The final act does not transform him. It reveals who he has become through the process of the film, and that distinction is what separates a well-constructed redemption narrative from a mechanical one. The Longest Yard from 2005 holds up because it understood its assignment precisely and executed it without overreaching. It is not attempting to be more than a well-made sports comedy with a redemption arc and genuine ensemble warmth. What distinguishes it from the many films that attempt the same combination and fall short is the consistency of its craft and the honesty of its emotional logic. The remake's skepticism that surrounded it before release was reasonable. The film answered that skepticism not by being groundbreaking, but by being good. Reliably, consistently, and without the kind of tonal confusion that undermines films that reach beyond their grasp. In a genre where the formula is well established and the margin between a film that works and a film that does not comes down to execution, The Longest Yard executes. That is not a small thing. And it is precisely why the film found its audience and kept them. That was Picture Mavericks. If this breakdown gave you a new way into the film, subscribe and stay with us. Every video is built around one idea: that the best stories reward the people who look closer. We will see you in the next frame.